Magos Cassius walked through the corridors of the spacecraft, which, since its departure from the Imperial devastated world, had grown new structures on the outside and abnormal techno-parasitic life inside. He was trying to map the ship's decks, but got stuck on one of the decks. The concentrations of aggressive mechanical vines were particularly dense there, so he had to burn his way through with various types of laser emitters. He managed to discover a hall whose purpose remained unclear. Dust-covered semblances of barricades were scorched on the floor and walls, and web-covered bones testified to battles from long past. But his attention was drawn to a wall with a fresco in the form of a strict block diagram. Such diagrams depicted standard hierarchical structures, where step-by-step demotion, the preeminence of a particular object, organization, or something else needed to be illustrated. When he shook off the dust, he recoiled in astonishment because the topmost rectangle had an inscription in High Gothic, Adeptus Mechanicus. This phrase momentarily threw his mind back to the past, to the distant years of the Great Crusade, when there was no Mechanicus yet, because that technological organization, which now holds an absolute monopoly on techno-discovery in the Imperium, was called the Mechanicum, or simply the Martian technocracy. Its adept tech priests produced the most powerful advanced weapons and equipment for the needs of the Emperor's army. For the priests of Mars play a vital role in the maintenance of many of the Imperium's machines and technologies, even those as complex and little studied as the Golden Throne. The Forge worlds subject to Mars are akin to vital organs that produce indispensable components and send them through transport arteries to various regions of the realm of mankind, but the Adeptus Mechanicus is only formally part of the Imperium, for they have always developed separately and possessed significant independence. They wield unprecedented combat power, and they also profess a faith in the Omnicia, which in many aspects contradicts the Imperial truths, so it would be more reasonable to call them the Allied Galactic State. Cassius understood perfectly that pernicious ideas about secession from the Imperium often arose in the circles of the tech priests, and the most striking example of this is the Martian schism that occurred during the Horus heresy. This event split the Mechanicum into supporters of Fabricator General Kelbor Hull, who sided with Horus, and adherents of Fabricator Zagreus Cain, who remained loyal to the Emperor. Both claimed the title of Fabricator General, and the Mechanicum viewed this schism as an unresolved equation called binary succession. In an attempt to solve this equation, a representative of Cain proposed to the Council of Terra the creation of a new Adeptus. Despite numerous concerns, his proposal was accepted. Thus, the Adeptus Mechanicus was created, incorporating all the loyal tech priests of Mars. Over the millennia following the Horus heresy, they remained adherents of the cult of the Omnicia, and their armaments supplied and continue to supply the armies of the Imperium. The Adeptus Mechanicus has its own hierarchy, within which lesser Forge worlds are subordinate to the greater ones, all of them sworn to the ruler of Mars. Cassius realized that he was looking at a schematically depicted structure of the organization. The person who drew it clearly aimed to document the entire internal hierarchy, though the purpose of this act remained unclear. Most likely it was an unknown tech priest whose duty included the cataloguing of information. Cassius's gaze fell slightly below the inscription, and he read the phrases, Fabricator General. For a moment, the image of Kelbor Hull, the first and true, the real, the one who rejected the Emperor's prohibitions and stepped further in the pursuit of new knowledge, the one who adopted the new faith but remained a mechanic, flashed in his mind. This position constitutes the highest structure of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and the tech priest occupying it oversees their Forge world. The Fabricator General of Mars is the most powerful among them, and as a leading figure of one of the most esteemed and influential organizations of the Imperium, he is invariably a member of the High Lords of Terra. This position is most often elected to the ruler of the Olympus Mons Forge on Mars. This complex was once overseen by Kelbor Hull. In the early days of the Great Crusade, the Martian tech priests were subordinate to the Parliament of Mars, and the Fabricator General acted only as the Red Planet's ambassador to Terra and as a member of the Crusade's War Council. It was only after some time that the position was equated to the actual ruler of Mars and the sole leader of the Mechanicum. After him, this position was held by a magos named Kubik, during whose reign the War of the Beast occurred. Next was Gustav Hediatrix, who ruled Mars in the Age of Apostasy. Following him was Wixot, who witnessed the Eighth Black Crusade, and the current ruler of the Red Planet is Aud Udia Raskian. But rumours suggest that Belisarius Cawl is attempting to attain this position. However, Fabricator Locum Gelman has continually rejected his requests for promotion. Other rumours suggest that the requests to Gelman are not sent by Cawl himself, but by one of the machines he created. The second most important position is that of the Fabricator Locum, the deputy of the Fabricator General. And though each Forge world has its own Fabricator Locum, each of them is subordinate to the Fabricator Locum of Mars, the second in the hierarchy of the entire Adeptus Mechanicus. In Cassius's data logs, there were mentions of 3 well-known Fabricator Locums. When Zagreus Cain was promoted, his previous position passed to Trimagia Diadanae, who became the Fabricator Locum for all loyal tech priests who remained faithful to Terra. He also remembered Eurytus Omnicron, who was the Fabricator Locum of the Forge World Esteban VII. He served on the side of Horus, and the siege of the Forge World Riser was inscribed in blood on the list of his crimes. A direct line from the studied section descended, and Cassius brushed the dust off the next fragment of the fresco. The block listed the names of the sacred orders of the cult Mechanicus: Magos, Genitors, Logis, and Artisans. The cult Mechanicus is a complex and intricate organization, inaccessible to outsiders, as the machine god's religion consists entirely of secret rituals and ceremonial processions. In every Forge world, myriads of tech priests of various ranks vie for supremacy, but one can only rise through the acquisition of technology and precious knowledge. Tech priests lead the army of workers in the cult Mechanicus, dedicating themselves to the Omnissiah's service, transforming their bodies beyond recognition for the ability to conduct repair rituals, appease machine spirits, and recover lost technologies. Given the galaxy's hostility, a tech priest must be capable of defeating anyone who stands in the way of his sacred mission. The term tech priest encompasses thousands of different roles within the Adeptus Mechanicus. Genitors explore the mysteries of life, creating increasingly bizarre cyborgs or killing xenos by the thousands to extract new secrets from their alien metabolisms. Artisans create and restore truly wondrous instruments of war, from ornate gamma pistols to mind-bogglingly enormous space arcs. Within the Adeptus Mechanicus, the ranks grow even more convoluted. Each Forge world is led by a Fabricator General, reporting to whom is a Fabricator Locum, capable of summoning various magi specializing in fields such as cybernetics, metallurgy, alchemy, data spindle, techno-assassins, hive wardens, and sacred reclamators. These individuals, in turn, may command groups of junior fabricators, fulgrites, corpuscarii, overseers, stasis scribes, or techno-dervishes. Cassius touched the red skull crowned with a fragment of the holy cog. Below it, the inscription was neatly rendered Magos. His consciousness immediately received a data impulse, and information flowed into his mind. A Magos is a high-ranking member of the Adeptus Mechanicus, entirely devoted to the principles of the machine god. They have perfected their chosen field of knowledge and become masters of a particular discipline. They sacrifice parts of their bodies to the holy calculus. New limbs do not wear out for decades, thereby emphasizing the greatness of the machine god. Magi visit the machine altars of the Forge worlds, which contain the accumulated knowledge of the Adeptus Mechanicus, representing the Omnissiah's will. Currently, some ranks of Magi are known, the highest of which is the Prime Hermeticon. Following in descending order of importance are ranks such as the Lord Dogma, Mechae Moribundus, Invictus Acquisitor, Gerontocraft, with the lowest rank considered to be the Data Predator. A Magos who has mastered their chosen field to perfection has the right to be called an Archmagos. Rumors suggest that there is another little-known rank, the Overseer of the Emperor. A tech priest of this rank commands a vassal world belonging to a Forge world. Each division in the myriad cells of the Mechanicus order is further subdivided into dozens of levels, and hence, to avoid confusion during warfare, the most senior tech priests assume the title of Tech Priest Dominus for conducting military operations. As architects of destruction, the Dominus can reduce entire worlds to ashes. It poses no difficulty for them to issue orders to pulverize a large city or completely annihilate a sentient species, erasing all mentions of them from historical records. They achieve all this not through diplomacy, but through relentless and ruthless application of military force, as they command legions of Skitari, the Electromancers, and the Legio Cybernetica. The high rank of Dominus is granted only to those who possess genuine talent for warfare, to those who believe that the supremacy of the machine god must be asserted at every opportunity. A Dominus can be either a magos biologist from the laboratories or a magos of warfare from the operational headquarters, as each of them has a profound understanding of the mysteries of weaponry. All secrets on the battlefield are an open book to them. The trajectory of every bullet, the charge of any laser gun battery, or the optimal target damage calculation performed by a combat machine. These and many other data constantly flit before the mind's eye of a Dominus. They revel in pure information and cerebral stimulants, enabling them to wreak destruction on a personal level while simultaneously coordinating frontline tactics and uploading war psalms via side systems. When Dominus enters the path of war, no one can consider themselves safe. For a tech priest, Dominus is capable of wrenching the machine spirit from a super-heavy tank while simultaneously turning its infantry escort to vapor. In addition to an already formidable personal arsenal, the tech priest has access to the extensive vaults of the Forge world, allowing them to take ancient relics to the battlefield, capable of imparting extraordinary destruction. In Cassius's mind, information surfaced about other disciplines within the Mechanicus cult. Besides the rank of Dominus, he recalled the rank of Magos Prime. This title was bestowed upon a tech priest armed and prepared for war, using the best weaponry and protective means. A prime is so heavily armed that they may externally resemble a space marine dreadnought, and the primes have their own subclasses. Archimandrites are magi entrusted with the secrets of Dark Age weaponry. They often represent a massive construct bristling with terrifying weapons, their augmented bodies still being operated by a living organism that was once considered human. Malagra are magos superiors, from the Prefecture Magisterium, the internal secret service of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Myrmidax are magos superiors from the Myrmidon Auxilia. Ordinators are the lords of the Order of Reductor and the Ordinatus, and the Lacrimalus are not particularly esteemed subclass of the Prime Magi. They are known as the Lords of the Cursed Tiers, armed with electroflails, and perform a vital function in any forge world, namely forcing slaves and thralls to manufacture the instruments of war. Besides the primes, he recalled the Onicota Concilium, or the Unifiers. This is a caste of tech priests elevated by the will of the Emperor, with the sole purpose of assisting the Master of Mankind with the Webway project. They bound tyrannical steel and Martian iron with prospects of incomprehensible unnatural materials, given form by long-dead and long-forgotten Xenos rulers. They integrated physical equipment with psychically resonant matter from another dimension and restored a Xenos city center within the depths of terror. They continued their research even after the war in the Webway began, but under the defense of numerous protectors, battle automata and thalax. Cassius also remembered the Magos Activators. When a piece of equipment leaves the assembly line of the Forge Temple, the first to encounter it is the Magos Activator. It is he who has the honor of invoking the machine's spirit. He inscribes flowers and glyphs on the tank's armor, while his acolytes take their positions as the crew, and the diagnosticians connect bundles of cables and activate the greenish screens. Then the activator reads flowers and litanies and invokes the machine's spirit, and when the engine roars to life, the weapons begin to animate, and the turrets rotate. The diagnosticians read all necessary indicators, check system operations, and conclude the prayer with the word activated. Each acolyte reports to the Magos, who then ceremoniously assigns the machine a name, number, and code. and states that these details will be entered into the Liber Armorum Magnus. Having completed the task, the activator withdraws, observing the tank's treads rotating on their own as a slave crew pulls it further. The Magos Autocatoris is a type of specialist of the Adeptus Mechanicus, responsible for life support, repairs, rearming and refueling Titans. On the battlefield, they often accompany these god machines as part of a secutarii cadre, considering it a sacred duty to assist and, if necessary, retrieve any Titan crew member forced to abandon their god machine or left within its wreckage, whether alive or dead. And to perform this honourable task, they are ready to sacrifice their own lives. The history of the secutarii is very ancient, and though they were first developed and deployed in the lost past of the Age of Strife, it was in the later times of the Great Crusade that they reached their peak. At the height of the Imperium's power, every fully operational Titan Legion had its own auxiliary regiments of secutarii. And just like the Space Marine legions, the Titan legions were divided into two camps during the Horus Heresy, and the associated secutarii fought on both sides of the conflict, god against god machine, to whom they remained loyal. Magos Juris are those rare tech priests who prefer to dedicate their minds to the study of the will of the machine god, rather than the knowledge it embodies. They intentionally abstain from the process of seeking knowledge and devote their lives to protecting it from misuse by ignorant masses. Juris relentlessly pursue those who are ready to commit techno-heresy or steal the secrets of the Adeptus Mechanicus. These magi track anyone who uses unauthorized technology or operates technology without the blessing and supervision of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Magos Juris will even go so far as to dispatch Mechanicus ships into uncharted spaces to hunt down their enemies. The fate of the guilty will be most tragic, for criminals condemned by Juris will serve for the rest of their days on a starship as servitors, their minds destroyed and bodies repurposed in the name of serving the machine god. There are many explorators who speculate that Magos Juris are actually agents of a secret order within the Adeptus Mechanicus, known as the Dragon Lords. This ancient and powerful clique consists of specially altered Archmagi who exist deep within the secret political circles on the Forge worlds of the Calixian sector, known as the Lathe worlds. Their task is to control the Mechanicus from within. However, there is no evidence that the Dragon Lords truly exist, and that the Magi Juris are not acting on their own initiative. The Explorator. Magi are a class of tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus who focus on exploring the cosmos to gather knowledge, often as part of fleets. Any tech priest desirous of seeking knowledge among the stars, discovering previously uncharted worlds, cataloguing unclassified phenomena, searching for forgotten archaeotech, and studying unknown life forms can become an explorator. Their brethren might call them fools, though they consider themselves fearless adventurers exploring the uncharted corners of the galaxy. It is known that the explorators of the Adeptus Administratum annually discover hundreds of new worlds, as well as new life forms and even new civilizations. A cyberneticist Magos can wield power that some find as strange and formidable as that of a psyker. Magi of this discipline can unleash terrible informational djinns that corrupt systems, overload power cells, and even turn the enemy's own weapons against them. Cassius touched the next symbol, a stylized DNA spiral inscribed within a circular cog. This was the symbol of the Genitors. This branch specializes in the study of organics. They often accompany Imperial forces when exploring new worlds, where their tasks include testing the local population for mutation deviations from acceptable norms. Rumors persist that they even conducted experiments on mutants during the Age of Strife. But this is one of the few divisions of the Imperium officially allowed to conduct experiments on Xenos to find the best ways of their extermination. For example, the secret research center Amphileon is used by the Genitors and Inquisitors of the Ordo Xenos to study the Tyrannid race. They use any opportunity to capture and study one of the representatives of this race, and to develop means against their organic weapons and capability of over-adaptation. These Magos were involved in the creation of many genetically modified entities of the Imperium, used by various branches of power. Moreover, their failed experiment on the world called Incunabula led to the appearance of the so-called accursed founding. Currently, the known ranks are Magos Biologis, Archchemist, Grand Parasite, Metasurgeon, Telepathic Enlightener, Genitor Extremis. Nominally, the Magos Biologis are divided into two subclasses. The Biologis Extremis are the so-called techno-beasts, who serve in the ship's surgical theatres of the Imperial fleet, and the Biologis Neuralis, priests who influence the mind. Members of the Order of Janitors are engaged in the pursuit of knowledge, like other tech priests, though they differ in that they see flesh not as inferior to metal, but as another type of machine. As with other dogmas, various philosophies interpret this ideology differently. Known factions include the Apexites. They have dedicated themselves to the search for perfect forms that emerge through adversity. Their views are based on the works of scientists before the Imperial era. The Hippocrasian sect, a community of Magos who study the mystery of the transition between life and death. They first appeared in the Calixis sector at the Hippocrasian agglomeration around Morwyn 6. The Carneculi, a splinter sect of the Hippocratians who strive to prolong the service life of vat-grown constructs. The Circle of Varnak, a sect spread throughout the eastern fringe dedicated to the eradication of the Tyranids. The Satellites of Vogel, a clique with a radical philosophy that believes forced augmentation is necessary to enhance humanity. The Divisio Genitor, a faction of the Forge Worlds, fascinated by the biological properties of the Magos of these Forge Worlds. Primus Humanum, the oldest faction in the Calixis sector. They consider the human form the purest vessel of knowledge, and the Emperor the ideal version of this vessel. Next he touched a round cog, in the centre of which was inscribed a horizontally struck-through O, reminiscent of the empty set. This is a high rank among the tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Because of their duties, the Logis are often considered almost prophets, as they are simultaneously analysts, statisticians and logisticians, whose aim is to predict future trends and draft forecasts about the expenditures and needs of the Mechanicus. The Logis also have their own ranks. The highest is the Concealer of the Lexicon. Following are titles such as Bibliophilist, Hyper-Rationalist, Observer of the Hostile, Info-Executioner, and the lowest rank, Bio-Cadet. There were no other details in the info fresco, so Skyphe touched the next symbol, which represented a hand clutching a wrench in the centre of a cog. This is the sign of the artisans, or, as they are also known, constructors. This term refers to the tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus, who design machines, buildings, spacecraft, weapons, and military equipment, and often oversee activities in Forge Worlds and control vast labour resources of servitors. The following titles are known among the artisans: Forge Master, Mechsage, Praetor Electroid, Cybersmith, Tech Archaeologist, Necromechanic. At this point, the binary visions in Cassius's mind ceased. He touched again, in hopes of obtaining more information, but there was none. It seemed that the data plates of this fresco had either worn out over time, or this was all the available information about the sacred orders of the cult of Mechanicus. However, the golden lines continued further down. The tech priest cleared another fragment, from which it followed that lower on the hierarchical ladder were members of the so-called common priesthood. These include electro-priests, machine seers, transmechanics, lexmechanics, and rune priests. There were no emblems here, only inscriptions written in High Gothic. Cassius touched the first one, and his mind was once again enveloped in a whirlpool of information. The word electro-priests surfaced in his mind. They are also known as Illuminan, or Sparks of Life, and are fanatically devoted to the motive force as one aspect of the Omnicia. They believe that all life and movement owe their existence to this ineffable divinity. Each devotee of the Omnicia bears a personal electo or electu tattoo. Some of these devices, taking the form of subcutaneous wiring, serve as small identifiers or data plates accessible only after being consecrated by a senior tech priest. They are so extensive that they occupy the entire nervous system, and the bioelectric impulses within them are so powerful that the electu can emit discharges of searing energy and intercept incoming bullets. With the aid of such devices, the grace of the machine god can descend upon both a fabricator general and a simple Skitari warrior. Even servitors and robots are blessed with a special kind of Adeptus, which serves simultaneously as a master's brand and a conduit of religious ecstasy. Through the Adeptus, followers of the Adeptus Mechanicus convey the electrical grandeur of the Omnissiah, and when the faithful are filled with a radiant aura of data, their fluid systems tremble with the sweetest nectar of pure information. During battle, the Adeptus of an entire procession can be remotely switched to respond to the same hymn and invocation to the Lord. Thus, the literates of the cult Mechanicus ensure that their cybernetic congregation attains the divine ability to smite enemies with living lightning, piston-driven fists, or the blinding light of true omniscia. Their faction is divided into Corpuscarii and Fulgurites. Elector-priests and Fulgurites spark with energy stolen from those they have vanquished in mortal combat. They are surrounded by a protective shroud of lightning known as the Voltagheist field, and within their reconnected veins and subcutaneous wiring of electro-tattoos hums a divine power. Fulgurites are among the most straightforward and militant apostles of the Omniscia. These holy warriors do not kill the enemy from a distance, rather, they manually expel the spirit from heretics and enemy machines alike. At the peak of religious fervor, a true believer can smite the enemies of the machine god with living lightning, and in the case of Fulgurites, they also drain life energy, much like the catachan megaleeches draw blood from their victims. This is the primary principle of Fulgurites, to seize the life energy of the galaxy, especially the bioelectricity that animates all things. Also known as the Brotherhood of Petrified Lightning, Fulgurites seek to capture the hostile energy of the enemy and repurpose it for the Omnissiah, thus reviving the motive force and reinforcing it with the power available to these priests. Fulgurites believe that only those deemed worthy in the eyes of the machine god can possess the unearthly grace of his galvanic power. They are willing to leave any civilization that does not glorify the Omniscia without energy, plunging the world of the unenlightened into eternal night. These selfish principles are not idle philosophy, but rather a sacred crusade, and the Fulgurites lead it constantly. To a Fulgurite, wasting energy is as monstrous a deed as allowing a non-believer to use it for their own purposes. Rather than strike the enemy from afar or use power weapons in battle, these priests march into combat with bared chests, smashing enemies personally with long, electro-leeching staffs. Each of these devices contains conductive rods that draw energy from those struck and store it in powerful capacitors. Fulgurites can deprive any enemy machine of its motive force, leaving it cold and dead. But even more terrifying, they can siphon the bioelectricity from living beings, drinking it in one gulp and storing it in capacitor cores, so that this energy can later reinforce the saint instead of the heretic. Those struck by such a blow will fall to the ground as corpses, cold and immobile as stone, while the Fulgurite moves on, reinvigorated by his sacred labours, his deadly staff crackling with the accumulated energy. Corpuscarii stand in stark contrast to their brethren. They are so deeply committed to the motive force that they seek to share its splendour with every living being and every machine that has not yet found the path to the Omniscia. Within the community of elector priests on each forged world, there exist many different subsects, each preferring its own rituals and rites of worship to the divine current. Truly blessed are the Corpuscarii, for the motive force literally flows through their veins. In battle, the Corpuscarii chant litanies from which energy charge accumulates within their bodies. Enemy fire meets voltaic fields scattering into sparks and branching out in arc discharges. In melee, these fervent fanatics can willingly summon lightning, extending their hands in electrostatic gauntlets and hurl deadly discharges at the enemy. Those touched by this sacred energy are granted ecstasy from the electric shock. In the brief moment before death, the non-believer will see the light, be convulsed in agony, and their body will burn out from within. Such is the generosity of the Corpuscarii, for their duty is to illuminate the galaxy and bring the non-believers to the light. The sacred vocation of an electro-priest requires strengthening, conditioning, and preparation of the body through electrosurgery, to endure the heavy trial that is to host the sacred energy of the motive force. Corpuscarii become living batteries that not only collect the motive force but can also direct it wherever they wish. Wearing heavy rubber boots is of paramount importance, for merely grounding the energy is considered wasteful among both the unceremonious Corpuscarii and the frugal Fulgurites. Electro-priests of both factions are unable to see as ordinary humans do. From the sacred electric current, their eyeballs run out of their sockets, streaming down their cheeks as drops and bubbles. This sacred phenomenon is known within the order as the Tears of Amnesia, and the Corpuscarii and Fulgurites are equally grateful for such a gift, as they can sense the electromagnetic imprint of both friend and foe and perceive the world as a sparkling landscape formed by the motive force that breathes energy into all existence. To the Corpuscarii, the inhabitants of the galaxy are no more than dim phantoms of electrical force, merely awaiting to be sent in a bright flash towards Amnesia. The schism that divided the Electro-priests has its roots back in pre-imperial times, when this branch within the Mechanicum was just beginning. The Corpuscarii factions focused their worship on the machine god, believing that his energy should be brought to the galaxy to enlighten the savages, thus providing new resources for the Order. To this end, they launched great religious crusades, expending a significant portion of Mars' resources in the process, but believed it was worth it. Those who would later become the Fulgurites were horrified when they considered the cost. They jealously guarded the motive force, that invisible deity that endows the ability to move of their own will to all living beings, whether they be machines or children of nature. Believing their patron's favour had limits, the Fulgurites accused the Corpuscarii of wanton and monstrous waste of the machine god's power, declaring their misuse not only of his universal energy for illuminating ships, but also the senseless dispersal of it into the ether through electrical discharges. The outraged Corpuscarii returned to Mars, and the Brotherhood splintered into numerous factions, leading to the onset of the First Conduit War. To this day, the surface of Mars bears the scorched scars inherited from those dreadful times. However, due to the doctrinal rigidity of the Electro-priests, this conflict will never be fully resolved. Currently, open conflicts between the opposing factions are fortunately a rare occurrence. Yet on each Forge world, both sides continue to perpetrate countless minor mischiefs against each other, both politically and covertly, and both factions remember the grievances inflicted upon them for a long time. Alongside the Electro-priests on the fresco were the Engine Seers. These are the mystic engineers of the Adeptus Mechanicus, devoted to the machine god and well-versed in arcane knowledge. Among the entirety of the Mechanicus cult, Engine Seers are the most frequently encountered across the galaxy, for by virtue of an ancient Martian agreement, they are assigned to the Astra Militarum and other fleets of the Imperium. Their mission is to ensure that the Loyalists have the means and capabilities to fight. Engine Seers service, repair and safeguard the Imperium's machinery, from combat tanks to starship gun batteries. Through their training and lifelong devotion to the machine god, these Magos are capable of appeasing even the most belligerent machine spirits with binary prayers and mystical rites. Indeed, without the prayerful diligence and tireless work of the Engine Seers, the war machine of the Imperial Guard and the Imperial Navy would soon grind to a halt. Engine Seers also appear in the armies of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and while their role remains centered around their mechanical wards, they are fully capable of leading the followers of the Omnissiah into war. To the soldiers of the Imperial Guard, an Engine Seer is an enigmatic figure, but within the Adeptus Mechanicus, he is merely another cog, albeit a very important one. While other tech priests are preoccupied with the pursuit of knowledge, Engine Seers engage in more practical tasks, overseeing hordes of servitors and safeguarding the machines they serve. Garbed in sacred power armor and armed with cogstaffs, they tread fearlessly across the battlefield, while robotic tendrils connected to their spine repair damaged equipment, lift heavy apparatus or tear enemies apart in close combat, writhing like serpents. Often an engine seer is accompanied by a retinue of servitors assisting him in repairs and providing some measure of protection. In many ways they resemble transmechanics, a variety of tech priests within the Adeptus Mechanicus who specialize in communication technologies. They act as service engineers and frequently fulfill duties in other imperial organizations. Beside the transmechanics on the fresco was an inscription, Lex Mechanic. This is one of the lower ranks of tech priests within the Adeptus Mechanicus. Their goal is to collect and analyze data to be input into the central data repositories. They work with machine speed and precision, gathering information on battles, economic statistics, planetary reports, and so on. Essentially, they are very meticulous bureaucrats, and thus are often tasked with assignments in the Adeptus Terra or the Administratum, and the last on this hierarchical step were the runic priests. These are a type of tech priests within the Adeptus Mechanicus, who chant hymns of praise to the machine spirits during rituals of dedication for new equipment within the cult Mechanicus. Such priests are trained in secret branches of scientific knowledge, such as intuitive mechanics, speculation, and improvisation. They are known for their unconventional thinking and can be called upon to solve problems when strict logic and standard procedures fail. The lowest part of the Adeptus Mechanicus hierarchy is occupied by servitors and techno-thralls. Servitors are mindless drones of flesh and metal used to perform simple tasks. They are one of the few permissible forms of robotics in the Imperium, as they are not manifestations of artificial intelligence. Many of them are grown in vats, but also criminals, especially those who have insulted the cult Mechanicus, are sentenced to lifelong servitude and handed over to the techno-priests for brainwashing, reprogramming and cybernetic enhancement to perform some specific rudimentary function. Servitors are devoid of intellect and possess only the most basic instincts. Their brains are programmed to perform only the task for which they were created. In rare cases, physical trauma can cause fragments of the servitor's former human personalities to emerge. The transformed and fragmented brain of a servitor functions poorly without constant control, so most fall into a state of lethargy, muttering incoherent nonsense when some semblance of consciousness tries to assert itself in their heads. Servitors are created by the Adeptus Mechanicus and supplied to departments of the Adeptus Terra, such as the Administratum and the Inquisition, and also make up the overwhelming majority of the population of Mars and other forge worlds, where they serve as workers. There are many types of servitors, each designed to perform a specific task. Typical servitors include technomats, who operate and maintain machines, holomats, who act as holographic recorders, lexomats, who are akin to human computers with vast computational capabilities, and drones, who are living robots, dumb and essentially brainless slaves, ideally suited for menial tasks. Servitors are often used to perform more dangerous or labor-intensive duties, such as mining. They also accompany tech priest machinists on the battlefield within the ranks of the Imperial Guard, as well as tech marines of various chapters. They assist in the repair of vehicles or sometimes carry large and dangerous weapons, such as plasma guns. In both divisions, servitors are nearly identical cybernetically, although the servitors of some Space Marine chapters are created from failed Astartes initiates. Arguably the most fearsome of all servitors are the Praetorians, a class of heavily armed and armoured servitors used by the Adeptus Mechanicus to guard tech priests and temples dedicated to the machine god, known as techno-thralls, also known under the name Assicularis. Despite their endless, exhausting service, they still attempt to create some semblance of society. The Assicularis have the same hopes and desires as Imperials in other worlds, and a few even defy their fate. However, their spirits are drained by the harsh existence at the hands of the Mechanicus. There are some Assicularis who are so morally broken that they become mute and indifferent to the world, obediently following any authoritative figure who gives them orders. Even if commanded by someone who is not a tech priest, they are considered a lower class than most servitors, and most Assicularis end their lives being recycled into servitor components, with their augmentic implants harvested for further use. However, when there is a need for expendable servants or troops, the Mechanicus employs them. Those selected are often captured prisoners or criminals and they undergo basic augmentics and cranial surgery in the process. When deployed in battle, the Acicularis are armed with various types of light weapons, such as shotguns, chain blades, and melter cutters. The golden line of the fresco extended further below, where it discussed the troops of the Adeptus Mechanicus. And first on the list were the Centuriae Ordinatus. This is a rather ancient division, with roots that go back deep into the Age of Strife, when Mars was an independent empire under the rule of the priests of the Omnicia. They specialize in carrying out particular tasks during major battles or sieges, and for such purposes create giant war machines, Ordinati. This term encompasses a variety of mobile weapon platforms that have proven themselves as city burners and fortress breakers. They vary in their power and sizes. The largest among them are considered relics of dark aerotenology, Primaris-type Ordinati, such as Mars and Endymion. The smaller deadly subclasses include the Ordinatus Minor, which were produced only by the most powerful Forge worlds during the height of the Great Crusade, and even then in limited quantities. When the Horus heresy began, many organizations split into renegades and loyalists. This fate did not spare the Centuriae Ordinatus, and the members of this faction unleashed all kinds of forbidden experimental weapons upon each other. But while the renegades under the leadership of Kelbor Hull were in no hurry to share such terrifying weapons with the War Master, the heretics of Zana too offered Horus no fewer than 3 Eulator-type Ordinati. These platforms were equipped with sonic weaponry and were in full combat readiness. These were Titan killers, army destroyers and city devastators, each powerful enough to single-handedly change the course of a battle, far surpassing any super-heavy tank in might and eclipsing the firepower of siege weapons that fell into the hands of the Iron Warriors during the Horus heresy. The few surviving specimens are used extremely rarely in the 41st millennium, for they were constructed during the Great Crusade and meticulously maintained over millennia. These colossal engines of destruction are not attached to any specific Titan Legion or Skitarii army. Instead, they fall under the direct control of the Centuria Ordinatus. It is they who decide whether these machines should be handed over to Imperial armed forces, as many of them are ancient indeed, and require a high level of training and maintenance, with some extremely rare models never having been activated at all and remaining preserved to this day. The Centuria Ordinatus approves the deployment of Ordinatus only for the most crucial battles of the Imperium or for meticulously planned operations. Such Ordinatus usually carry weapons of broader application which have already demonstrated their capabilities on thousands of battlefields since the Emperor's ascension to the Golden Throne. These artifacts are revered by tech priests as the embodiment of the machine god. Thus, they are not subject to further improvement and are never considered morally or technically obsolete. When Ordinatus are dispatched to war, sacred writings are inscribed upon their hulls. They are anointed with oils, and incense is burned as offerings to the machine god. The most trained Skitarii are assigned to their control, fighting with fervent fanaticism. The mechanisms of the Ordinatus are powered by giant plasma generators, which drive their treads and energize their weapon systems. This power source is extremely unstable, so upon the destruction of an Ordinatus it creates a massive ball of boiling plasma, whose devastating effect is hardly less than the firepower of the war engine itself. Nearby, Cassius discovered a mention of the Collegia Titanica. This division manages the most powerful war machines in the Imperium of Man and oversees them. Born in the Age of Strife, when the first temples of the Omnicia were being erected on Mars, the Titans are the embodiment of the military might available to the Emperor of mankind. Armed with massive cannons and missile launchers capable of wreaking terrible destruction upon the enemy, they dominate the battlefields across the galaxy and stand as a testament to the unparalleled skills of the tech priests of the Mechanicus cult. Each Titan is part of a larger division known as a Titan Legion or Titan Order. Each Titan Legion is based in a Mechanicus Forge world and remains under the direct control of the Adeptus Mechanicus, who jealously guard these mighty war machines and hold the right to determine to which war zones they will be deployed. It is precisely this power that provides the rulers of the Adeptus Mechanicus with the majority of their influence when it comes to determining where the armies of the Imperium will fight. This power is coveted by other factions of the Imperium, especially the priests of the ecclesiarchy, who greatly welcome the reliable support of Titans in their wars of faith. Ancient and relentless Titans, colossal war machines, massive bipedal battle robots the size of multi-story buildings, are rightfully known to the tech priests as god machines, revered as physical embodiments of amnesty. Even the smallest class of Titans is powerful enough to annihilate an entire tank division or level a city block in mere seconds. Every Titan Legion is an ancient warrior order, inextricably linked to the Forge world on which it is based. The Titan Legions are fiercely proud, each with their historical alliances and rivalries, as well as a unique character that makes them somewhat akin to their brethren among the orders of the Adeptus Astartes, or the houses of Imperial Knights. The Magos stepped to the left and touched the next fragment of the fresco. Auxilia Myrmidons of Medon, a division consisting of elite tech priests, commonly known as siege engineers or military scientists. In the Calixis sector, the undisputed centre of power for the Auxilia Myrmidons of Medon are the Forge worlds and their extensive network of forged cities, as well as their heavily fortified arsenal and base on the Panopticon orbital station, the size of a city. From this proving ground, the few existing Medons deploy in small detachments to oversee the defence of Mechanicus holdings and to track and annihilate their enemies. The Medons, though largely independent, are closely tied to the Archmagos of the Forge worlds, who are one of the guarantors of their dominance. This sect of the Mechanicus exists to study the art of destruction with the same zeal that their brethren might apply to the creation of mechanisms or the restoration of lost archaeotech. Legend holds that they arrived in the sector in the early days of the Angevin Crusade for their own reasons, and have since remained to defend the holdings of the Mechanicus cult there. By order of the ruling Magos of the Forge worlds, they accompany explorers into the most dangerous sectors of space and extract the most hazardous samples of Xenos, while others are tasked with tracking down renegades accused of the most heinous techno-heresies and eliminating them by any means necessary. Those tech priests who devote themselves to combat often join one of the militant sects of the Mechanicus, as their knowledge and mastery increase over time, either through their own application or the will of their distant Archmagos masters. The first rank in the Auxilia Myrmidons is the Myrmidon Secutor, who ostensibly serves as a standard soldier. It is believed that the ancient designation Secutor dates back, like much of the organization of the sect of Octus, to the armed forces of the Mechanicum of Mars in the distant pre-imperial antiquity of the Age of Strife. This fact only adds to their mystique and makes them a subject of some concern to those adepts who understand what this means. Undoubtedly, this conclusion is supported by the ancient and horrifying weapons extracted from the distant past, which they sometimes employ. Some techno-priests of the Auxilia Myrmidon are drawn to the path of the Myrmidon Secutor due to their admiration for the unique intellectual challenges that warfare presents, while others feel captivated by the complexities and beauty of creation and destruction, or the sacred art of the forge. Still others see this path merely as a means to an end, whether it is to protect the cult of the machine, to advance their own independent research, or for some other hidden purposes. Regardless of the reason for their calling, a techno-priest, skilled in such destructive arts as the Myrmidon Secutor, is an invaluable ally to an Inquisitor and becomes an exceptionally deadly acolyte. The only drawback to such an alliance is that the Inquisition can never be fully assured of the Myrmidon Secutor's loyalty or the ancient and dark secrets they may possess. The stream of data about the Auxilia Myrmidon has ended, and the techno-priest began to read the information about the Skitarii Legion. The Skitarii, also known as Tech Guard and the Skitarii Legion, are the cybernetic armed forces of the Adeptus Mechanicus of the Imperium of Mankind. They take pride in their holy work, glorifying the Omnissiah's power as he drives them to ever greater feats. Targeting grids and calibrators select targets with supernatural precision. Galvanic rifles roar, and the bullets of the servitors find the skulls of enemies. Radiation weaponry makes the battlefield even more toxic until it becomes as contaminated as the waste of the Red Planet itself. On their titanium limbs, the Skitarii creep through the war zones of the galaxy, appearing from above like columns of rusted ants hunting on the dunes of Mars. Their unbounded faith in the machine god and his physical incarnation, the Omniscia, drives them forward without rest. Their meditation on divinity is sufficient rest. Once contact with the enemy is established, their pace neither slows nor quickens. With a barely perceptible shudder, the Skitarii accept the doctrinal imperatives from their tech priest masters in orbit. Rifles and carbines are raised to shoulders in perfect unison, and a bloody war begins. The Skitarii are deployed to defend forge worlds of the Mechanicus, manufacturing facilities in other parts of the Imperium, and often accompany high-ranking techno-priests and magi as their bodyguards. The Skitarii also serve as armed forces protecting Mechanicus exploration vessels that delve into the galactic fringes. Additionally, they safeguard the massive war machines of the Centuria Ordinatus and Titans from boarding actions, preventing enemy forces from reaching the dead zones of the war machines, where their main weapon batteries are ineffective. Several Titan legions maintain their own Skitarii detachments for this purpose, known as Secutarii, and if they do not, their Mechanicus masters will provide sufficient forces to protect the sacred god machines. Further along, there was a record of the Myrmidon Cybernetica, one of the oldest divisions of the Adeptus Mechanicus, responsible for deploying fully autonomous combat drones, both for fulfilling combat missions and supporting Imperial armed forces in the field. The Legio Cybernetica can trace its lineage back to times preceding the birth of the Imperium of Man, when Mars was an independent empire ruled by the tech priests of the cult Mechanicus. However, many of those within the Legio rejected the Emperor during the Martian Schism and sided with the traitorous forces of the War Master. When this conflict concluded, the traitorous cohorts of the Legio Cybernetica fled to the Eye of Terror, where they remain to this day, mutilated and corrupted by the influence of chaos. The remaining loyalists of the Legio Cybernetica re-swore fealty to the Imperium, and its members took oaths of loyalty. The first scholars of the Legio experimented with artificial life during the age of dark technology and endowed their automatons with the gift of independent thought. This decision cost them dearly, and with them, the rest of humanity. After the terrible consequences of those times, the dreadful concept of Silica Animus was outlawed forever, its creators subjected to fatal excommunication from the Church, and its revival punishable by torture unto death. Yet there were those who still sought to remain in their shadow, perfecting the thinking machine. Instead of creating automatons with human souls, many tech priests and heretics created machines imbued with the animus of devoted beasts, or worse, entities from the Empyrean. This too had catastrophic consequences. These same methods are shamelessly used by the so-called Dark Mechanicum, attempting to infuse their machines with the power of the predator automatons of that cursed age. And now, in the 41st millennium, the animalistic models of combat automatons Thanatar, Castellax and Vorax are forgotten in all the Forge worlds, save for the most fearless and independent, and the Dark Mechanicum is spoken of only in whispers. Yet the fear and grim legend of these unstoppable robot armies continue to live. Following the end of the heresy, the Legio Cybernetica once again earned the respect and admiration of the rest of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and even the lay people of other imperial adepts, although it has been rarely utilized in the recent centuries. However, it is known that info warriors are held in particular esteem within the Legio. There is a special category of tech priests who program the Castellan robots of the Legio Cybernetica at the manipular level, often right in the heat of battle. They have access to a dizzying array of weapons and equipment from the arsenals of their Forge world to protect themselves and their charges. Since the end of the War Master's rebellion, the robots of the Legio Cybernetica are fully controlled by their masters and not by their bioplastic brains and nerve-like weaves of tendrils used previously, but by sanctified doctrinal plates, a mixture of living tissue and electronics, the supply of which is often even smaller than the robots themselves. These brain inserts, no larger than imperial tarot cards, are entrusted to the Cybernetica datasmiths, who accompany the maniples of robots into war. The command protocol recorded on the plate, which is inserted into a slot under the chest plate of each robot, dictates every nuance of behavior, and as a rule, elevates destructive skills to quite impressive heights. If a tech priest wishes to change the behavior of his charges, for instance, to a shunt-oriented conqueror protocol, he must manually extract the previous plate and insert a new one. If a manipular of robots finds itself in combat mode without a datasmith, it will continue to follow the last doctrinal protocol until it expends all its energy, which can usually take more than a week of relentless carnage. But the cult of the Omnissiah is prepared to endure these risks and limitations, for the integration of autonomous reasoning into a combat automaton is categorically forbidden. Further attention should be directed to the Ord Reductor. Known under this name are outstanding siege specialists, destroyers of worlds who had access to many archaeotechnical devices and forbidden technologies. The title given to them, which was unusual for the servants of the Mechanicum, was first mentioned in the Treaty of Mars and Terra with the Emperor of Mankind, although their true and forgotten origins trace back to the dust and blood of the Age of Strife on the Red Planet where they were born. According to this decree, under the clause of that very treaty that solidified the alliance between the Mechanicum and Terra, the Order Reductor was created with the clear purpose to divide and destroy those who would stand against the Great Crusade. Wherever a new terrible alien form of life was encountered that did not succumb to the military weapons of the Imperium, it was the biologists of the Order Reductor who found a way to annihilate it. Wherever a defiant human techno-empire offered strong resistance to the fleets of the Great Crusade, it was the mentors of the Order Reductor who observed and analyzed their weapons and defenses to find their weak points. It is most well known that where the fortress seemed impregnable, it was the Ordo Reductor that found a way to bring it down. The numbers of the Ordo were always relatively small, initially consisting of only a handful of the most warlike Magos of Mars, who henceforth separated from their forges to primarily serve the Great Crusade, and secondarily their feudal masters in the Mechanicum. Even when contacts were established with other forge worlds and they were accepted into the fold of the Imperium, their numbers did not increase significantly, and often, it is said, not without reason. However, individuals in the ranks of the Ordo Reductor were redeemed by the doctrine of the cult of the machine god, and given a righteous purpose in the service of the Mechanicum, and were significantly distanced from the feudal politics of the forge worlds. Though they became different to those who remained in the direct shadow of Mars, they were not regarded with the same level of suspicion and mistrust as the Legio Cybernetica. The final fragment of the Technofresco was a record of the Imperial Knights. Imperial Knights, or Quaesta Imperialis, are walking combat robots of small to medium size in the service of the Imperium. In the service of the Adeptus Mechanicus, they are called Quaesta Mechanicus. Each knight is piloted by a single human warrior hailing from an ancient feudal aristocratic culture spread across the galaxy. These ancient battlesuits reach up to 12 meters in height, are protected by nearly impenetrable ion shields, and equipped with a devastating array of heavy weaponry. Their vulnerable limbs and joints are shielded by broad adamantium armor plates and supported by an inbuilt ion shield that responds to the mental commands of its noble pilot. The presence of just one of these gigantic machines of destruction is enough to change the course of a battle. Only the titans of the Adeptus Mechanicus are feared more by the enemies of humanity. During the strange and horrific rite known as the Rite of Becoming, the noble merges his mind with the machine spirit of the knight, creating a union of flesh and metal. Only then can the noble truly take the Mechanicum throne to command the towering knight. The Quaesta Mechanicus differ from the Quaesta Imperialis only by the number of houses that have pledged their loyalty. The remaining distinctions lie in the degree of technical equipment of each house. Knight armor comes in a variety of forms, each with its strengths and weaknesses. The two most common types are the Knight Paladin and the Knight Errant. Both use the same basic body form, but are equipped with different weapon sets. Both are favored for their balanced and deadly combination of mobility, protection, and firepower. All knights are protected by thick adamantium armor and equipped with powerful weapon systems. Typically, this includes two primary types of weaponry, one attached to each of its arms, which are supplemented by a range of auxiliary weapon systems mounted on its body and shoulders. The hand-forged armor protecting each knight was crafted long ago, and thus elements such as individual armor plates, helmets, or crests can significantly vary depending on the skill of the creator. They are often richly detailed and adorned with intricate heraldry that reveals the knight's allegiance and the deeds they have performed in battle. In addition to their armament, all knights carry powerful shield generators known as ion shields. This ancient technology operates by projecting an energy field over a narrow arc in front of the knight. Both the Knight Paladin and the Errant Knight are traditionally armed with enormous melee weapons and are renowned for their mastery in using them, attacking the enemy and striking left and right with their massive chainswords. This impressive capability for close combat is supported by powerful ranged weapons capable of tearing apart enemy machinery and heavy stubbers that obliterate infantry targets. In some knight worlds, other, much rarer types of knight armor are used. Among the heaviest types are the Crusader and the Castellan. Although they are slower than other types, these two benefit from substantially increased firepower and much thicker armor. There is also a known model called the Lancer, a faster version of the standard knight suit. These maneuverable machines are used for flanking the enemy, reconnoitering their defenses, and distracting enemy forces, while slower units take up positions for an attack. This type of armor is extremely complex to manufacture, and thus its use is usually reserved for rulers of knight houses or nobles who have proven themselves worthy of it in the crucible of victory. However, while the Crusader, Castellan, and Lancer are justly revered, the perfectly balanced combination of speed, firepower, and armor of the Paladin and the Errant Knight makes them the finest specimens. Magos Cassius stepped away from the fresco. Now that all the data points had been studied, he reviewed it again. Before him was a detailed schematic of the currently known structure of the Adeptus Mechanicus. In essence, it was a graphic interpretation of its power. But now that feeling of inadequacy, which had led him to leave the ranks of the Loyalists, sprouted once again in his soul. He had understood even then that despite an insatiable thirst for knowledge, most tech priests of all branches of the Adeptus Mechanicus had long lost the ability to invent anything new. No longer masters of their creations, the Mechanicus cult had turned into slaves of the past. They uphold the glory of days long gone through ceremonies, dogma, and dictates instead of learning and understanding. Even a theoretically simple process of engine activation is preceded by the application of ritual oils, the burning of sacred resins, and the recitation of lengthy and intricate hymns. If a mechanism fails, as often happens in war, one must search for a replacement or information on how to repair the current one. Thus, across the galaxy, thousands upon thousands of fleets and armies embark on searches, guided by a database that began even before the birth of the Imperium. Should they find such an item or knowledge, it is immediately seized at any cost in the name of the Omnicia. Cassius silently exited the hall and without turning back gave a wordless order to the distorted Skitarii accompanying him. "Destroy